Hey, this is Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here for another Random Thoughts podcast. Slowly getting caught back up on my Red 5 wrap-ups. This time looking at the month of April. Yes, it's July when I'm recording this, and it'll probably be August when I post it. We'll see. But I had some fun ones from this month. So first one was a combo between converSWations and BlackSpire Outpost. This was a really good podcast, and they talked about Ashoka. And what if Vader killed Baress in Order 66? And I thought this was a really neat idea because when they kind of did a little bit of redemption for Baress, that kind of seemed like an odd thing. Like, that turn was always something that caught me very off guard. But the idea that the Anakin they got, now I'm not a fan of the prequels and stuff, but the Anakin we got was very much revenge oriented. And while part of his transformation of the dark side, I could see him killing Ahsoka, and he, for all intents and purposes, did that in Rebels. I could also see him taking ones who had personally wronged him in the past, even though technically he switched sides now and all. I could see him taking that extra effort, going in person, doing that. I thought that was such a neat idea, and I like some of the comics that showed like there was one that was like Vader went and faced Watto and took him out. So, just stuff like that always interests me. And I also find it interesting, when you think of we never see the Empire really doing anything to Naboo. So I wonder, like if does he leave that be out of respect to Padme? But then he blows up Alderaan, which was Padme's best friend's planet. But anyways, I do like that idea of him giving it that personal touch. And then converSWations talked about Endor. I love me some good murder bears, and I've been waiting for somebody to do some Caravan of Courage talk and just kind of go into that, because I think there's a lot of lore there, and I think that's something that we haven't seen on Disney Plus. As far as something new in that thing, there hasn't been any Ewoks, and at one point I actually appreciate that, because the Ewoks would be they're limited to that planet. We shouldn't be seeing them going to other worlds like we do the Jawas and stuff. It's just like, you wouldn't expect to find a sand person on another planet. So a Tusken Raider, they should just be on Tatooine. So I really like that, and I really appreciated that you guys kind of went into that and talked about their courage. I definitely like Wicket and really kind of giving us a little bit more depth to the Ewoks. And I think a lot of people look at them and they go, they're just little teddy bears, but how could they be that? But I look at these little animals, and some people say, well, it's silly that they're able to beat these Imperial troops. But when you look at like a chimp, which compared to a human is much shorter, but a chimp has, the power to rip an arm out of a socket like a Wookiee. So, I look at those little bears, and, some of it's my own mind and imagination, but I look at them as being pretty strong, pretty buff, and definitely little brave guys. BlackSpire Outpost then was asking the question, why get rid of the clones on their podcast? And I think that what it was is that the Emperor, as useful as they were, in the way that he was able to take out the Jedi, he was afraid of that being used against him. That eventually, at some point, if he continued his reign of tyranny, somebody would figure out how to manipulate those chips to turn the clones against him. And so once he established that power and was tightening his grip, so to speak. He wanted to get rid of that fatal weakness. Because if you have a chip inside all of your troops that if somebody figured out a way to hack it, to update it, to do something to it that could suddenly turn them all against you in an instant, that's a dangerous defect. Whereas, yes, humans can be swayed, they can decide that they're not working for the right side, they can do all that, lay down their arm, but not whole armies. Because you have armies of thousands of people of different points of view, and so no matter what, there's going to be people who are going to be Empire loyal. Whereas with clones, with those inhibitor chips, if something could be tampered with that, they could suddenly all turn on the Emperor. And I think he realized that as a weakness and got away from it. From a certain point of view podcast, you talked about your favorite baseball movies. And I have to tell you that I am a person who doesn't like baseball. I don't like to play baseball. I don't like to watch baseball. But I like baseball movies. As a sport, it moves way too slow. I do not, while I'm good at basketball and soccer and stuff, when it comes to anything with like the baseball is too small for me. I can't hit that for anything. But anyways, you talked about this. And of course, I liked The Rookie. The Rookie is one that I feel is kind of overlooked. It kind of came out, we don't get a lot of sports movies anymore, and I feel like it kind of came out at the end of that, and it was at a time. I remember I had some friends. I'm like, oh hey, let's go. You want to come watch The Rookie? We're gonna rent that. And I remember I had a friend go, I don't watch G-rated movies, and I hadn't even noticed. Like, it wasn't even a PG movie; it was a G-rated movie, and it's just so good and wholesome, but it's an enjoyable movie. It's got a good story. You don't really need any color added to baseball. But it's an enjoyable tale, and like that concept of like, here he's past his prime. He's making it big, and then he loses it. Of course, when it comes to baseball movies, I mean, there's a lot. There's Angels in the Outfield. There's all these things that I watched as a kid, but The Sandlot definitely sticks out. That, stuff like that, The Little Rascals, Goonies, like, that in effect is part my childhood and part what I wanted my childhood to be. Like, I went, when I was at home, I lived in a not so great neighborhood. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere to that, but when I went to my friend's house on the other side of town, he lived on a ranch, and we pretty much could go off into the woods and the mountains, have all sorts of adventures, do sorts of things. But I didn't until I was older, and we moved to a different city where I could be on a cul-de-sac and play with the kids. But just the camaraderie of the kids and stuff. It reminds me of like when we were out adventuring and doing things like that. So good. And the way that kids over dramatize things that happen to them, when the envisioning of the dog and how that is so how I was as a kid. So I really love that movie. And of course, this is going to seem a little bit like a joke thing, but the Sonic movies, Sonic movie 1 really kicks off with a baseball game. He's having with himself, doing the whole Flash thing where he's playing all the characters on the field and he's all by himself. And he realizes how alone he is, and that motivates him to run real fast, and that causes electronic magnetic pulse blast that knocks out the satellites and all that and causes a blackout that gets the military aware of him and Robotnik aware of him. But then the second movie ends with him playing a game with Tom and Maddie and Tails and Knuckles. And they're all playing, and Carney's, and Knuckles is playing the base of balls. I am the winner of the base of balls. And he punches the ball, just takes it out, and then they're all going to go for ice cream. And it just, to me, is really interesting because The creator of Sonic is into baseball, Yuji Naka, and there's been a lot of baseball. Sonic, like of all the sports, baseball to me is not the sport I would see Sonic doing. Like baseball, golf, sports that are slower. I totally see Sonic as soccer. He's all about footwork, so like that makes sense. Any fast-paced game like that, especially less contact, probably not as much football, but like basketball, maybe hockey, but just fast-paced stuff. And I know there was a Sonic baseball game on the Nokia phone in Japan and stuff like that. And it just kind of, so when that was in the movie, like it makes total sense to me because as a cultural thing, I know the creators have tried to make that a thing. They do posters with Sonic and baseball uniforms and stuff. Done a long time. They've done it in all the cartoons and different things. So I just kind of thought that was really neat, and it was really neat how that tied and bookended the two movies together. So I thought that was really cool. So while neither of them are a baseball movie, together they kind of have like this through thread of baseball, as does Sonic all in general. Okay, now Scarif podcast. You were talking about space battles. I love space battles, and Battlestar Galactica, both the classic and the newer one, has some amazing space battles. When I think of space battles, though, the first thing that comes to mind is like the Wrath of Khan, when they're all going through there and the different levels. But when it comes to in the actual TV show, I think space battles didn't really get. It was Deep Space Nine and Voyager had some really good space battles. But I also liked when we had Stargate Atlantis. Like Stargate itself did not have a whole lot of space battles. It was mostly like an armada of spaceships that we somehow blew up or did something. And it was neat to see that, to see like Gould hot vessels coming in and all that kind of stuff. And but when it got to Atlantis, then we got to see like the darts versus the puddle jumpers. That was some really cool stuff in there. But really, when I think of space battles, it actually brings me into video games, and I think a lot of Star Fox. Wing Commander 2, but like Star Fox is nothing but battle, and I love that. And some of those battles are so iconic that even to this day, we're seeing like they keep remaking the same game, and like seeing Andros' big head in HD being fought with this. It works. It works. Really wish we'd get more Star Fox. But who's kidding me? My favorite moment in all of Star Wars is the original Death Star run. And that is, to me, peak Star Wars. When you say Star Wars, that is actually what I think of. I mean, sometimes I think of R2-D2 or Vader being, but my main thing is when somebody says what is Star Wars? It is X-Wings going into the trench of the Death Star. And this is Red Leader calling Gold Leader, all of that dialogue, that is Star Wars to me. And so I think that's probably the most epic space battle. And there's been a lot of other space battles in Star Wars, some really cool, some this. I still go back, my favorite one in all of Star Wars is from A New Hope, that original Death Star run. Okay, Salty Nerd Podcast. You talked about Mission Impossible. Now, I find this funny because I like the first Mission Impossible because it is very much a mind game and it's not just about dumb action. I am not a big, stuff are almost comic booky, over the top action, kind of like the Fast and Furious, although I have not watched nowhere near all the Fast and Furious. That is something I mean to do some point. But I've only seen, I don't even know if I've seen half of them. But when it comes to like action movies, I don't like the direction they've taken James Bond, where it's just all shooting action stuff. I liked all the spy espionage stuff, and one of the things that I felt that Mission Impossible set itself aside is it was intellectual. It was a spy thing, but it was also a mystery. And you're unpacking that mystery, and you're trying to figure out what's true and what's false, because there's all of these lies upon lies upon lies. And so trying to figure all that out. So when the second movie came out, I was not a fan at all. I remember I watched the second and third movie, and then I think I just dropped off. And so when I thought it was funny that Kadish, who liked the one director but didn't like the movie, but then liked the J.J. Abrams movie and thought that because it's just flashy in action. And I, on the other hand, I find this weird because this is very much un-Kadish-like, in my opinion. Because Kadish is usually the one on the podcast that looks for like the deeper meaning and all that kind of stuff. To me, it felt so shallow. It felt so soulless. It didn't deserve the Mission Impossible name. It was just bland action movie X. And to me, Mission Impossible was a kind of above that. It's what elevated the Mission Impossible brand to being comparable or being able to stand alongside Bond. Because at that point, pretty much every action movie of spy thing, I go, it's not as good as Bond. And Mission Impossible came out, and I'm like, wow, it's not Bond. It's not the same thing. It's not like it's replacing Bond. But this has its place. This should be a thing. And since I've seen some of the later movies, and I like that they bring some of that back, but it has become too much about the spectacle of the stunt. And I really wish they would kind of go back. What I find interesting is I have a friend who watched the TV show, and he watched the first Mission Impossible and absolutely hated it because he just thought it was no substance, all just flash and action and bangs. And a big part of that is that team is the team from the show, and the guy they make the bad guy is like Ethan Hunt's best friend. This is like the man who sees him through thick and thin. And I can understand that because I remember with the what is it, is it CW? No, it's not CW, it's CBS, whoever does the MacGyver reboot. When they made Pete Thornton not only an Asian woman instead of a fat white guy, but who was, MacGyver had two friends that he could count on no matter what. And one, of course, always had schemes and little things that would get MacGyver in trouble. But the other one, he was like, it was his boss, but it was also his best friend. The guy he could count on was Pete Thornton. And when Pete Thornton hired Murdoch to kill MacGyver because he was actually really a double agent and was the bad guy, or bad girl, woman, whatever, that really ticked me off because that's like the core of what MacGyver is. And when they did it, and when they got away from that, I finally actually started to like the show a little. But yeah, that was a big thing for me. Stargate Atlantis, man, what a show. And of course the pilot, that's just an amazing pilot. When we think that, so dating this recording, I just watched last night the Farscape pilot with you guys, and you compare that pilot to the Stargate Atlantis pilot, and woof, what a difference. What a difference. Of course, with all of these things, there's silly things like them not being able to suddenly be able to speak other languages or plug into a crystal of an alien technology and hack into it or whatever. Like, some of that is just silly and dumb for plot convenience. But man, this such a good pilot. Now, you did the Storm as a two-parter and the stuff with the Janai, which is interesting. I am a person who likes the Janai stuff. I know a lot of people don't, but I found that interesting. I know for me, I probably would have been, and this is a big skipping, but I would have gone the pilot, and then I would have, and this is staying out of just season one, but I would have done the episodes leading up to the 2-episode season finale, and then the first episode of the next season, and just really showing this is where it starts and this is where it goes just by the end of the first season, and it's all epicness. They really went out epic with that. But the Storm definitely is a good and fun enjoyable thing, but I know the tonight stuff. But it's funny. You guys were talking about C4, and you were talking about C4 a lot. Matt Vader especially was like just going on and on. Nuclear bombs were made almost. Now I'm off my head. I didn't write it in my notes, but I looked it up. It was almost like 100 years difference from, maybe it was like 50 or something, but C4 was developed quite a bit after nuclear time periods. And so when you're looking at what technology level they are, they're not World War II. This is Cold War Russia is what the Janaya is. They're not Nazis. They're the Russians, basically. And it's funny because like nuclear fusion and stuff like that, like where they were, because they didn't have working bombs. They didn't have plutonium. They didn't have the stuff they needed to start it. They just had a working knowledge of it. That stuff, beginning of World War, whereas C4 is something that was developed decades after that. So the idea like that they're so astounded by C4, because yes, well, it is something very simple in concept, and once you know how it's made, it's something that virtually any civilization on this planet can make and have for their armies, whereas nuclear is much more involved. If it's not been discovered yet, it is definitely a game changer. And so you can't undercut what something like C4 would mean to a civilization that's, still working out. Like when you compare dynamite to C4, like it's a completely different thing, much more volatile how they would have to do that. And because they needed a trigger thing, they were looking at C4 as the potential for starting it, which it's not. There was other things, and you didn't get to the episode where they actually do make bombs for them, because that's in a later season. And so that's interesting. All right, so that's the end of the Red 5 podcast. But something that's kind of become a thing here is so many of the Red 5 podcasts are talking about the same shows. And instead of doing a dedicated podcast to that show, or doing a writing down notes per show, because a lot of times what's happening is I gotta admit, when I'm following there's 37 Red 5 podcasts, and I'm watching and listening to like 32 or 33 of them. So when you think about it like that, it's if 12 of them or 10 of them or even just 6 of them are all talking about the same show, it's really hard for me to keep track of who said what, who had a point that I thought about. But we're going to talk about Moonknight and Halo. So with Moonknight, this is one I think I might have put this in a previous video I did, but it was both enjoyable, but then Joker voice. I love you, and you should definitely sub to his channel. He definitely keep talking, and he definitely has a unique perspective, and very colorful and enjoyable with his theatrics. But boy, he was in the Red5network podcast, just dragging everyone about Moonknight. And it's funny because me and Joker Voice have very different reasons why we disliked Moonknight. And Moonknight, to me, it would seem, I'm such a huge Stargate fan, which deals all with Egyptian mythology. You should think that I'm like already a built-in Moonknight fan, but I'm not. And I liked when it was all going to be like head stuff and this and that, and thinking and mystery and knowing. I disliked that they resolved it. They didn't leave it all in his head. I know a lot of people would have been upset the other way, but to me the CGI was not great, and I'm beginning to think when I compare these different shows like Hawkeye and different stuff, I and while I am looking forward to She-Hulk, this has all been the biggest complaint about it, and the biggest thing. I do think that they should not be doing these CG heavy shows as Disney Plus Marvel shows. The Disney Plus Marvel shows should be for the street level, for the Daredevils, for the Hawkeye, for that kind of stuff where there isn't a whole lot of CG. Because if at the end of the day, if you can't do the budget, don't do it. And it's weird because I'm forgiving of a lot of things on the CW. I have a problem with like how the CW is now, but I've forgiven a lot of the bad effects. I don't mind that so much. But the CW is its own continuity. It is superhero TV. But this is not considered superhero TV. This is considered MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so it just looks off when you're supposed to be treating it like you treat one of the movies. It's just not up to par. Now, I know it's because the budget's not as big. Maybe don't pump so many shows out in a year. Maybe don't be making so much. Make less, make them higher quality, and, make other Disney XD style family shows and different things to add value to that. But don't constantly be pumping out the thing, And yes, there'll be people who unsubscribe and resubscribe. That's a matter of fact. Most people don't. And most people, if they really enjoyed it and they're going to come back. How many people still had an HBO subscription when HBO Max became a thing because they liked Game of Thrones so much and they just never canceled their subscription? Like, if you bring top tier television, it's going to keep people there. How many people went out and bought the cheap 2-year thing just off of The Mandalorian? How many people have Disney Plus just because they like The Mandalorian? That's enough. And that's a show that happens not even once a year now. So realistically, yeah, I think Moonknight could be better. Some of the things, though, this is a thing that the MCU is bringing in all these god beings and their, the way that they're, expressing the universe as like they just didn't partake. It's hard. And the Eternals, I think, as much as I didn't care for that movie didn't feel like an MCU movie. It felt like it's its own thing. But they at least did a decent job of explaining why these characters didn't take place in the snap. All in all, when you find out how the snap negatively have affected their plan, that kind of falls short. It was short-sighted of them. But when it comes to, and it was something that kind of like belittled, like, oh, Tony Stark made this great sacrifice and ended the world if we didn't come in and fix it. That's, and then Thanos had a plan, but it also adds depth to Thanos, that maybe Thanos understood this, started and endeavored on this because he is one of the Eternals. It's just one of those interesting things that maybe his planet was one of those planets that he went through and it got destroyed, and he's memory, because he's so old and that, and they talked about they had memory problems from their age, is more to do with that, what initially motivated him. That kind of adds depth. I wish they'd explored that more, but they didn't, because they really had all these things happening and never once did an Avenger or any other superhero show up. But you come here in Moonknight, and all this stuff is taking place, and no other heroes show up. Nobody looks at it and goes, "Oh yeah, that's a thing that could be real." They all don't believe anybody none of that's. They act like a world that doesn't have superheroes, that doesn't have giant alien invasions. The world does not feel and you don't know if it's post or pre-snap. It's just really it's out of the MCU, and it's very loose, and so that's what bothered me. Now the changes to the character. First of all, there's been, I believe it's 2 runs of this character, and they both made a lot of changes to it. And when you look at how comic book writers, I mean, when you look at like Batman, um, there's been like 3 or 4 different origins for the Joker. They go through these different things, adding new characters, like this new character who's, his female companion. Yes, she's not the one. Well, look at Spider-Man. Like Mary Jane is a character that basically just came in and supplanted Gwen Stacy. And they've had other characters in live action, different ones who've come in and taken that role, from Felicia Hardy, different ones that were not the original. Look at Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn is something that the cartoon creators made that is now dominated. It is like synonymous with Joker. But that's not from the comics. That's not from the original characters. That is not a dimension of the Joker that existed before, but it's been added. So I don't have a problem with the new female character. Now, the Hippo Lady giving her eagle powers seemed weird. Why not see Osiris? The end kaiju battle was just, it was laughable. It was so badly done. There's so many things in this. It just, when he turned back the night sky, stuff like that. This show, just at the end, it was boring. It didn't have the mind depth that I was thinking it was going to have, and it didn't feel like it added to the MCU. Like, you can say what you like or don't like about Loki. I feel that Loki set up a lot for future movies. It set up a bunch of the stuff of explaining what the multiverse is, who Kang is, all that. Like, it's giving us all these nuggets that are going to fall into place into bigger movies. The same with WandaVision. Like, you watch Multiverse of Madness, and WandaVision sets up for that. If you went into Multiverse of Madness and didn't see WandaVision, you're completely lost. Now, there is a debate about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it built up there. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, that show got edited to death because its original script and what it was filmed as was all about not trusting a government during a pandemic. And then we were in a pandemic, and Disney felt they couldn't release that show and had to change the whole motivation of the Flag Smashers. All that being said, while there were things about the show I didn't like, and it was wonky in a bunch of its script, I felt the action in it was decent. I felt the fight scenes in it were decent. The special effects, for the most part, in it were decent. I felt the chemistry between Anthony Mackie and all of a sudden I can't think of it, but Winter Soldier and Falcon. I thought they had a great chemistry, and so I am interested in seeing what they do next. I know a lot of people are just not. I give that show a lot of pass because of what happened, and to that show that just kind of massacred its script, massacred what they had shot, and they had to reshoot it and just kind of cobble it together with limited reshoots because they didn't have the budget and they didn't have the time. But I can see what that's setting up. Moonknight doesn't feel like it sets anything up. Moonknight doesn't feel like it adds to the MCU. It doesn't feel like it's part of the MCU. And there's a lot of Phase 4 that doesn't feel like, I don't imagine seeing the next Avengers and seeing Moon Knight and the Eternals all being there in some big battle against like Galactus or something. Now they just announced like all these other movies and a bunch of them sound interesting, but some of these shows felt like they're just little side blips and they're not actually part of the bigger story. Now I could be completely wrong. These characters could play a pivotal role in Secret Wars, but I don't think so. And I think if they do, that's going to be really hard for a lot of people to have Moon Knight be, character number 7 in an ensemble movie, knowing nothing about them, not having a movie that people went and saw, and being a TV show. And what's funny is these TV shows are basically the length of like 2 movies because they're a bunch of 6 30-minute episodes or whatever. But people look at them, TV show. Oh, that's an can't get past that barrier. We'll see. Do I think the MCU is going to survive just fine until the end of Phase 6? Yes, because they're doing it 2 years at a time. So that's like 5 years away. So I definitely think that MCU Phase 6, but then instead of, 22 or something, we're going to be at like 60 or 65 movies /shows to combine the MCU. And I think that's when it's going to bust. I think they're going to get to the end of it and they're going to have to do a universe reboot and go back to like Iron Man, like just completely end the universe. It's do a movie and restart and recast all the characters. And maybe, just maybe, have like a 5-year gap where there is no Marvel. Maybe they do, or get to it where it's like just 1 or 2 movies every, but you kind of almost need like, here it's calm, it's final, let's end it and do that. I don't see them doing phases 7, 8, and 9 working. Unless they somehow kill off like 99% of the heroes and start completely with new heroes where people don't have to have really watched any of the previous MCU, I find it really hard that it will keep going. But that's kind of, Moonknight was a bore for me. I didn't find that it was feminist propaganda or anything like that, but I did find that it was kooky. It didn't feel in place. Halo. Okay, Halo. A number of ones talked about Halo. I know a lot of people felt that this show didn't need to exist. They knew no matter what they were going to mess it up. And that we don't need to see Halo in this. It was better in the games. I don't play Halo games. I don't play any first-person or third-person shooters. Not only because I'm not a big fan of just mindlessly killing things. Like, I don't play the Star Wars ones either. But that's not to say I'm not interested in the properties. But the big thing is that I'm just not good at twin stick. I can't. I mentally, it's a block for me. The N64 was the last system that I could play any shooters on. I can't do the one hand aiming in that. My brain doesn't work that way. So I don't like these games. But I've always been fascinated with the Halo universe. I've watched cutscene compilations. I've watched Red vs. Blue, different things, dabbling a little bit in the books and different things. And it's a fascinating universe to me. So I was all in on this show. First couple episodes, I didn't have a problem with Quan Han at all. That character became less likable the more the show went on, and it kept taking over. The Master Chief with the helmet thing, and even the director commented on this, that they did it on purpose. But I didn't have a problem with Master Chief taking his helmet off. Especially since a bunch of the show was going to take place on base where he wouldn't be in his uniform. But when he's in battle, and it's like between scenes of battle, he's taking it off so he can have a dramatic look. Like, no. I mean, that's what made, like, Boba Fett versus the Mandalorian show. Like, Boba Fett walking around almost the entire show with no helmet on was just a waste. He should have been, I definitely wanted some Tamora Morrison without the helmet on, but it should have been definitely much more. And it was funny to see Master Chief like put his helmet on. It's like, okay, he's gonna go to work, walk over somewhere, and then take his helmet back off. Like, that is just complete trolling. the Quan I feel like if you edited out the Quan Ha storyline, there's actually an enjoyable show in here. The stuff that happens with Halsey, some of that was really cool. Like when they showed how an AI is made, my red versus blue mind went, that was amazing. Like the whole, you had to clone yourself, and then basically the process of copying a human mind liquefies the brain. So they had to clone themselves. So I'm thinking red versus blue. I'm thinking Leonard Church made a clone of himself. All that stuff we saw with Halsey, where the clone is like begging for her life. I'm seeing Leonard Church do that. The Dr. Leonard Church that tortured the Church AI, the Alpha, to Splinter's mind. Actually doing, like, it adds even more to what he did. What Halsey, like, that stuff was cool. When Master Chief went into battle, that was really cool. I didn't mind the whole thing about the Intimidator. If we cut out all the stuff about his friend who was like the Pirate King and Jean Quan Ha, if we cut that whole storyline off, which went nowhere, added nothing to the overall story, we'd have probably a decent Halo movie. Is it perfect? No. We're saying it's an alternate timeline. It's not going to be perfectly your Halo, but I thought it was cool. I liked seeing the universe. I liked seeing this stuff brought into live action. I'm interested in seeing the next season. I really hope that they bring somebody else on and they do something better with it. So, like, when you look at these two shows, I don't want a season 2 of Moonknight. I won't watch it. I have no interest in where Moonknight goes. That show, if that was supposed to introduce me to a character to look forward to them popping up in a movie, all it has done is made me completely lose any interest I had in that franchise. And I feel bad because I know some people loved it. I know a lot of people, the fact that he's dealing with a mental illness was like a big thing that called to them. That's a big thing in my family. A lot of members of my family deal from some serious mental issues, but nothing to that extent. But all that said, like, I don't think it was the best show of that, because in the end, it made it so that, like, that was part of his superpower, was that he was mentally disabled. That he had this illness that needed to be treated. What's the message there? And it was goofy, and it didn't fit, and it doesn't feel like the MCU. I don't see that character fighting alongside an Iron Man, a Captain America. So it's just, when it goes off that they were both kind of equally bad in a way, but at the one hand, I'm looking forward to a Halo Season 2. I am hoping from fan feedback that there will be some course corrections over at Paramount. Will there be? I don't know. I don't even think it's not the same director from the beginning to the end of the season, so I don't even think the Season 2 is going to be a different director altogether. You have somebody new coming in who quite possibly has no attachment to what's already happened, is going to look at the fan feedback with an open mind. So we look forward to seeing what comes next. Okay, so that is everything that happened in the month of April with the Red 5 Network and all the pods and shows we talked about. Next time we'll have May, and there's definitely a bunch of stuff there. We'll have to cover Obi-Wan Kenobi. But with that, hope everybody's having a good day, and I'll catch you in the next video.